to his ministerial colleagues is to take a bill through which privileges the rich.
Mr Chairman. Honourable Peter Dunn. Mr Chairman, I was reminded, listening to the member particularly, but one or two of his colleagues beforehand, about a statement that Winston Churchill once made about, I think it was Aneurin Bevan, when he said that the honourable member should not develop more indignation than he can contain, which I think was certainly true during the previous speech. Let me just... The bar might be high. I don't think the member could get there. Let me just come to some of the points he's made. I'm sorry to disillusion him on a key premise of his argument. I am not in the least unhappy at this legislation being passed. I have promoted the abolition of gift duty during the time that his government was in office and beforehand. So I'm delighted to see something that I've been committed to for a long time finally being achieved. Now, I listened to the arguments which essentially say that this is fundamentally unfair because somehow it's taking away a block. We know it doesn't actually raise any money, but it's a sort of a symbolic thing that stops people from behaving in a way that we might regard as inappropriate. Well, I've got two comments to make on that. Firstly, tax law is not about symbolism. Tax law is about getting the revenue that the government needs to perform its functions. Every member who's spoken in this debate so far acknowledges we get no revenue effectively from this. But the argument somehow seems to be, oh yes, but it's the symbolic impact. The second point I'd make is that if you look at the other mechanisms available, the social security legislation, the legislation that MSD administers regarding access to the various long-term health and social subsidies, there are provisions within those pieces of legislation that can prevent exactly the type of concern that members opposite are professing this afternoon. And then also, the previous speaker made references, well, I'll come to that in a minute. The member made references to the ability of people to manipulate trusts. In fact, Mr Chairman, one of the things this government did last year was align the trust and top personal tax rates so that the logic of using a trust as an evasion or avoidance mechanism was considerably diminished. Now, the member talks about working for families, he talks about student allowances. Mr Chairman, we have made it very clear, we legislated for, in the wake of last year's budget, definition changes for the purposes of income to effect for working for families. Work is underway, it was announced earlier this year, on student allowances. That is about to follow. So what I'm trying to put before the member, there is a comprehensive suite of measures being put in place that confirmed what? I'm sorry.
Confirmed that you can drive the Trust Range Rover and then get a student.
Absolute nonsense. No, you can't. You can't. There was a funny claim made at one stage by the Labour Party in the Select Committee that somehow you could get all your school fees exempted. We went and checked that. No one found any record to give any substance to that claim. And I say to the member that the Range Rover claim comes into the same category. Mr Chairman, this issue is a simple one of administrative efficiency. We get no money from this tax. We spend about half what we actually get in administering it, and there's a massive compliance cost to people in being part of it. It is a no-brainer when we have other measures in place to address the concerns that members opposite raise, to continue with a tax that, when put in place in the 1880s, it's been around since 1885, was put in place in an entirely different environment from that which prevails today. Mr Chairman, what members opposite are arguing is a bit of nostalgia politics. I wouldn't call it envy politics. It's let's keep what we've always had because it's always been there. And under that scenario, Mr Chairman, you'd never make any change whatsoever. This is a tax whose time has been and gone. This is a tax that most New Zealanders will be pleased to see the back end of. This is a tax whose demise was well and truly foreshadowed. It's now time to perform the last rites on it, and this legislation does precisely that.
Honourable Leanne Dalziel.
I want to follow on